Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
First of all, we would like to thank Swede for this event. This event is organized by the Young Professionals Network, which will be presented by Miranda later on, and for the Sweden Alumni Network Brazil, which I represent, and is a global community of people who have studied in Sweden, who have earned the scholarship from the Swedish Institute, or participating in their leadership programs. So I'm the president of this network. Just this one setup. And Vitor Malin here is the vice president. So if you have studied in Sweden or know someone who has studied in Sweden, please join our network. We will going to show our social media later on after the event. And yeah, so we thank you all again and enjoy the event. Please, Miranda.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Miranda. As Marcela told you, I work with the young professionals here at Swede, and we create events for young professionals who are in the ages of 20 to 35 approximately. It's everything from company visits to events like this, where we get to talk to entrepreneurs and people in the business, but it's also happy hours and more social and informal events. And I would like to say welcome to everyone who is online watching us through StreamYard. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. As Marcela mentioned, I'm Victor. I'm the vice chair of the Sweden Network. You all introduced already. I guess we can introduce the key people here now. Do you want to start with Ícaro?
Yes, we have Ícaro da Silva with us, who is online. Ícaro, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
Great, and we can hear you as well. Perfect. Ícaro is with us. He is in Sweden right now. He can tell you a little bit more about that later on, maybe, but he is from Ericsson, the director of intellectual property at Ericsson. And with us here, we have Olle Widén, who is the co-founder and CEO of FinanZero. Okay, everyone, so let's get started. Ícaro, could you maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ícaro, as you said. I am from Fortaleza, Brazil. I suppose that there are many Brazilians among you there in the room. I can't see all of you, but that's what I was told. And at the moment, I'm based in Stockholm in Sweden. So I've been living here for about 12 years. We are somewhere between 12, 13 years. And I came directly from university as a researcher in Brazil to Stockholm. So this was more or less my first job. I say that because depending how you count, right? Like the work at the university is very different, especially if you are still graduating. So, and then I started a path as a researcher for quite many years at Ericsson. Did many things we can talk later about. And recently I joined the patent department. And I'm driving some part of the licensing negotiations we have with smartphone players. And I'm also an inventor. So that's a bit of a summary of, let's say, my career path and the relation between Brazil and Sweden. So I used to say that I've never really worked in Brazil in a company or in an office except for the university. So, which is quite interesting because most of my professional experience is actually in Sweden. Yeah.
Cool, and let's skip to you, Ulla. Say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, I guess the opposite. It's Ícaro. I'm from Stockholm, and I live here in São Paulo since 2010, almost 13 years now. Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur now. I'm a CEO and co-founder of FinanZero, a marketplace for credit here in Brazil. I guess we're gonna talk a bit more about that. I actually, more than 20 years since I moved from Sweden. Lived in London before living in Brazil, and before moving here. Lived in Spain, Russia, and Holland as well. So do my best to try to keep my Swedish connection and with family and friends and so on. I love Brazil. I have a Brazilian wife and a Brazilian son who's 3 years old now. So I have a pretty deep roots. Been connected with the Swede champs since pretty much day one. I think 2009 I met Jonas for the first time and actually helped quite a lot with the transition moving over here to São Paulo. I moved with Bloomberg. I worked with Bloomberg in London for about 4 years, and then I managed to get a transfer over here. The reason was personal in the beginning then because of my wife. We met in London. And yeah, I don't know if you come to that later, but the dream was to be an entrepreneur, and Brazil had very good conditions to realize that there with a lot of potential opportunities and so on.
Cool. Okay, Ícaro, back to you now for a little bit. Could you please expand on why you ended up in Sweden and why you ended up at Ericsson?
Sure. So during my graduation, I had a chance to have the first international experience. So I did part of my studies in France, in Lyon. That was like 2 years. Then when I went back to Brazil, I wanted to stay a bit in Brazil, but I wanted to go somewhere else afterwards. Then I joined a master's program in my hometown, which was in the telecom area, and in that group they had a partnership with Ericsson Research, which actually is nowadays a long-standing 20 years actually partnership. So they basically were doing research together, and from the beginning I thought it could be a good opportunity. I had never visited Sweden. But then after some time towards the end of my master thesis, I got this offer to do an internship in Stockholm, basically to share results and interact with people here, which was a great opportunity. So I came to Stockholm in 2009, and that's where I did some work. I spent some time here. I could understand a bit more how it was to live in Sweden for about 6 months. And then I realized that this could have been a career choice, like to not only move here, but perhaps to work in a certain kind of area as a researcher also, instead of staying in academia, pursuing a PhD, things like that. And then after some time, when I come back to Brazil after my master thesis, I got a job opportunity here, and then I moved. That was 2010. And since then I'm here. So that's more or less it. So it was through some university partnership with Ericsson, and then opportunities appeared, and that was basically my first job.
And Olle, how was this process of deciding not only going to Brazil, but staying in Brazil for so long, and I guess you say here for quite some time?
Yeah, like I said, almost 13 years now. I think the plan in the beginning was to do it, give it at least 3 or 4 years. Then I have been in London for 6 years. So I have to say, yeah, this 13 years went really fast. The reason why Brazil was more personal with my wife, but I had been here actually 3 months. Was 2006, 3 months with a backpack, moving around Latin America, 3 months in Brazil. I know a bit about it. And then when she, went over with her, got to meet her family and so on, I fell in love with Brazil even more and realized I was working at a multinational. And of course, where do they have a head office for Latin America? In São Paulo, close to where she grew up. It was a big idea at the time. It's not easy to get a transfer over here as a Swedish person, not really related to Latin America. But I was lucky with Bloomberg being more open to this, people moving around within the company, and had to show that some ambition learning Portuguese and so on before. But yeah, probably without FinanZero, without going into that line into the world of startups, I wouldn't have stayed this long. And now with family and everything, yeah, it's pretty deep roots.
Great place.
Yeah, it's definitely will be my first or second home for the rest of my life. Yes.
Back to Ícaro again. So how did you adapt in Sweden? How was the working culture different in Sweden? You mentioned that you worked very little in Brazil, but if there's any takeaways from that, any differences?
Sure. I mean, your question implies that I have adapted. But maybe it's fair. I mean, after 10 years or more than 10 years, I can say I have adapted, but there are still a couple of things that, you struggle with. And it's interesting because it's a slow process in a way. It's not that when you arrive, you get a crash course of, oh, those are the things that you need to know about Sweden and about the work environment. They just start happening, and then you react to them. And on the way, some small mistakes here and there will happen, and then you realize that you should have done different things in a different way. So one anecdotal thing I recall is like when I noticed from the beginning that management in Sweden is very, it's very professional and very kind. And I'm not suggesting at all that this is different in Brazil. It was just like an initial experience. And then I noticed like when they wanted to ask you for something, it's always this very polite way to say, oh, it would be good if you could do this or that. I think they're very like, never too straightforward, which is nice, but sometimes it could be a little confusing. I think Brazilians are a bit more to the point. I think the Germans are also a bit to the point, but the Swedes have an interesting way to, go around but it's a kind way on the other hand. Maybe another interesting topic is language. So at the beginning, it's a great thing that in Sweden you can speak English because most people at work, no doubt, of course, at least at Ericsson in research in particular was a very international environment. So everybody spoke English from the beginning. But even out there in society, majority of people on streets, an average Swedish person speaks decent English. So that is very good when you arrive. You can survive pretty well. You don't have to learn Swedish. But then over time, it's a kind of a trap because then you feel too comfortable with, and then you don't learn the language so well. And I think you miss out a couple of things in society. So that is something I recall. And then there are other small things in society, like things like practical things, like how do you go and try to rent an apartment in a city like Stockholm? There are some tricky things there, or when you're going to buy an apartment here, you have to go for a bidding, which is very uncommon in other places in the world. I see some laughing there. People recognize that. It's pretty interesting. And another anecdotal thing is, I think you were joking about the socks, right? The happy socks. Like, if you're invited to someone's party, it's more important to have nice socks than nice shoes. Because you're gonna take your shoes away when you get to that places. Which I find that a very interesting cultural thing, a very, very good idea, actually. Yeah. The other thing is get on time. I guess, of course, South America is a bit more relaxed when it comes to keeping schedules and time. If you start something, if you're invited to an event in someone's houses in Brazil and they say it's 7, don't be at 7 because probably they're not ready to receive you. And then in Sweden, I don't know if this is still true, but in Sweden, it's like we have these funny jokes that people arrive a bit earlier, but then they're hiding until it's actual time because they knock on your door. So they're probably hiding somewhere until it's time. So those are just small things, but in general, I mean, I find it's a healthy work environment. I would say people are very respectful on people's time, like to not overwork, and they respect a lot that you must have your private time, your free time, because it's important for your health and things like this. So I find maybe the wording is it's very respectful and a good environment to work.
Olle, are you used to hiding before you show up at people's places?
No, I've never done that. But I know, Swedes are quite punctual, right? And pretty much the opposite, which a lot of things, right, with social customs and so on, is the opposite, Sweden and Brazil.
We want to explore a little bit about this Swedish work culture as well, but I guess we can go back and you explain how FinanZero actually started, when you took the decision, how was the process, and what was new for you to do in Brazil. You said it was a good environment here to be an entrepreneur. So how was this whole thing?
Yeah, I think a few different things. It was my first startup, my first company that I founded. So I don't have anything to compare with in Sweden, but I think a lot of people warned you about all the red tape and so on. In Brazil, it's quite complicated and so on. But it was back in 2015. I met my co-founders, looking at different opportunities. I had looked in 2013, a couple of years before, at a similar thing. FinanZero is a marketplace for consumer credit, loans, financing, and so on. We were looking at the marketplace for receivables or facturas, factoring. That didn't happen, but we formed a little team and worked the weekends and evenings and so on. So I guess I had some preparation for this, and I had a wish for 2 years before I left in a big company like Bloomberg. I had this way of thinking about taking that step. So 2 years kind of building up preparing yourself and so on. I was lucky then meeting my co-founders, another three Swedish guys that lives there. I'm the only one here. But they had some, they were more experienced from Sweden. So nothing really from Brazil, but from Sweden. So that helped also with the preparation. We were the key to build the business was to have some banks and to have some lenders to be part of the marketplace, of course. So that was the market research we did during 2015. When we had that, then we started thinking, okay, this could actually work. Had some good feedback on that, and we started. We had some seed money, some funding to start up the business, and then the last few months before I took the step, we started looking at how it's actually to start a business here with all the registration and all the administrative part, which is quite tedious and time consuming and so on. And it costs money and so on. So it's a bit of it's a big step. But at the same time, we're looking at the size of the market, the potential, of course, and so on. But that was in the end of 2015. And first employee in March 2016. We actually registered the company and started not fundraising, but do networking to get more funding on board as well, which we got before we launched the company. Today we are around 75 people, and we have around 75 actually, or now 78 banks connected. We have more than 1 million people per month applying. We have, since the start, we have now 43 million people or applications. So we definitely have a business.
You have a whole Stockholm applying.
Well, yeah, pretty much. So it's been a busy time. It's been an amazing journey to build this. But you asked a bit about Swedish or versus Brazilian job culture.
Now we can talk about this. Did you manage to implement some of the Swedish culture here to the Brazilian place?
I hope so. I have Nito here actually from my team, but that's the goal, right? And I think a lot of startups is doing the same, try to avoid bureaucracy, hierarchy as much as possible. I mean, for me, it's been kind of organic where, you have first year, maybe 8 employees, and then now up to 75. So always try to be available, but know everyone by name and family situations and so on. It was a period, I think 2020 and 21 and a bit beginning of last year that we were hiring a lot of people. I think we hired 40 people in 12 months. So it was a bit more stressful, and you kind of lost the control a bit of that. But I think I managed to have a more Scandinavian and kind of flat organization, and it's something that I wouldn't say is only like Swedish Scandinavian. I think it's also startups versus kind of more traditional companies. But we have this culture with finish a day, open a beer or grab a coffee, and I like the try to keep it as a more of a family, as a family instead of a team or a bigger company.
Great. And one fun fact about Ícaro is that he won inventor of the year at Ericsson. Ícaro, could you explain a little bit about that? How did you work your way up to becoming the inventor of the year at Ericsson?
Sure, absolutely. So, first of all, this is an award that Ericsson gives every year to a few individuals. So it's usually 3 people that gets every year, and it's based on their inventions, right? So the contribution to our IPR portfolio, which is used in licensing, negotiations with other companies, which contributes to our revenues every year. So, when you work with Ericsson Research, which I was working at the time, inventing was a natural part of the process of the day-to-day work. And I got the chance to work quite a lot with 5G technology from the very beginning, when it was really only from the research times and up to the point where it started to get standardized, and then the initial designs and then the initial products. So then I think I was a bit lucky, privileged to be on the right spot when that kind of business was starting. And at the same time, I think I foreseen that from the beginning, that it could be an opportunity to grow in my career and perhaps even be awarded, because the award existed before. And since I was on the kind of front seat also when the technology was starting, I think I had the opportunity to have many inventions that are now part of 5G. And that year, when they gave the award, they wanted to reward something related to 5G, and I was a good candidate. So that's more or less how it happened. And I was also the first South American, which was also nice. And there was a little bit of publicity in Brazil. And that was also how I actually got connected to Ericsson in Brazil after 10 years. So that was also an interesting path. And then now I'm still an inventor, but my primary work is working with licensing. So I actually moved to the patent department. Now I'm working with inventions, someone else's inventions also, within the Ericsson, in this licensing project. So.
Very cool. Congrats, by the way, for being the first South American. Nice.
Thank you.
Olle, I was actually thinking now, to be an entrepreneur is quite hard, and Brazil is also quite hard. So how does a Swede come to Brazil and get all this success? Like, how do you think FinanZero grew so fast? Was it something you implemented? You know, do you think there was a special recipe that you've done?
What's the secret sauce? I don't know, persistence, right? And I mean, it's been 7 years now, so it's been a lot of ups and downs. And I would say the first 2 years, it was more downs, or at least in terms of results. But it's a lot about timing, luck, but I mean, proper market research to see, for us, what's most important, that banks are not that digital here and they are interested in joining a digital marketplace. That was kind of the basics. And we saw this we could kind of cover pretty well in market research to see, okay, the banks are not as digital here as they are in or were at the time in Sweden, but there's a willingness to, or kind of a, not willingness, but yes, the banks have a need to become more digital fast. And of course, you have the big top 5 banks, but also you have this mid-sized banks, the FinanZeros and the smaller banks. We saw that the market opportunity was really there. So I guess good market research, but also in terms fundraising and not really having any results in 2 years and losing your main partner bank in the first year, that you have all your results with a lot of things happen along the way. But don't give up, and have co-founders that you always, don't be alone. You have a team that you can discuss this. I was lucky also with our first, or our main investor at the time came on very early, already in 2016. The head of that fund, BEF, or Boston Emerging Funds, joined the board. He was also kind of a very important piece of this this journey to build a business. But I think, the timing. If we would have founded a company of 3 years later, this crisis that's happening now, with the tech winter for all the startups that I would say started with when Russia invaded Ukraine last year, we wouldn't have survived that if we wouldn't have had a few years already in terms of results and built. Most important we have now is with this bank partners we have, that we built integrations, API integrations with more or less half of them. So we have a structure that took many years to build as a platform, as our product. And also I think the idea that we were looking at Europe was, we see a lot of digital businesses are using digital media only. So performance media, Facebook, Google AdWords, and now TikTok, Instagram, and so on. But we saw from day one of the opportunity to build a business was that traditional media, or TV mainly, was also a few years maybe behind the development in Europe, Scandinavia, Sweden, with things becoming, going into streaming, becoming more digital. And we had some of my co-founders had the experience as well from Sweden, buying media, negotiating with TV houses here, Banje, Record, SVT, Global, knowing that they were knowing the world is becoming very digital fast. And okay, we are willing to negotiate with new startups, having contracts for 1 year or 2 year, buying media in a different time. And because our idea is to bring an offline audience online. And that, I mean, it's not only luck, but we saw that we kind of had that plan as well. We knew that, we raised around 29 million dollars so far, and half of that have gone into marketing and to build the brand. And then we know, okay, Brazil has a very strong reach, penetration with the TV, the traditional media and traditional media houses. So that helped us. That strategy was very risky in the beginning to raise a little bit of money, try to build your business have money for 12 months, try to hire a team, build, but also take half of that money and invest in media. That was risky, but it worked, luckily.
Now see your commercials.
Ícaro, I would like to know a little bit more about the actual patents that you work with every day. Is it still directed towards 5G, or could you expand a little bit more on that?
It's mostly related to 5G. So it's like, telecommunication systems are already complex. So we need to make this little device here to communicate with network equipment, which is spread around the city and the world. And there are various problems that we address, like, for example, the power saving. Like, one thing I have worked a lot was like, how to make sure that the phone is sleeping when nothing is happening, but at the same time, you have to very quickly connect back when you have to transmit or receive some data, because then it's like you have to establish a connection and exchange a lot of information. So this was something that, for example, I worked a lot, or the development on high frequencies and so on. But it was mainly patents related to the 5G system, and especially the communication part. Like, one thing that is interesting in mobile systems is that we have companies manufacturing the phones and companies manufacturing the network equipment. And those equipments, they have to talk to each other. That is basically what 5G is about. How will they talk to have this low latency, this very high data connections, and etc.? How do you do that? And this technology needs to be agreed among an ecosystem of these companies, including our competitors. So it is basically a competition of which solution is the best. And during this process of competing / negotiating with all the companies in the ecosystem, that's when we are inventing, and that's when some of our patents become part of this global 5G system. So when I say that I have patents on 5G, it's actually a global 5G system, which is everywhere in the world and in every single phone. So that's quite the fun part of this work.
Okay, one more question for each before we open the Q&A. I want to talk about future then. So how do you see next year's, FinanZero, I guess, grew a lot than maybe you expected in the beginning. Do you plan on growing it even more, open new businesses? Maybe you might not say everything.
No, opening up new businesses, no. I think when we founded the company, our plan was maybe in year 3 start looking at other countries in Latin America. Probably Colombia would be one of the first markets, Chile, Peru. But we realized already, I think in year 1 or year 2, that the Brazilian market is so it's so large, it's so big, it has such a potential. So now, year 7, we're very focused on Brazil, to be honest, but never say never. Let's see. We definitely have a platform now that's very scalable outside Brazil as well. But right now, for the products that we work with, FinanZero, home equity or secure loans, and then normal personal loans, we have about 0.3% of the market that is coming through our marketplace. So it's a lot of potential. In Sweden, for example, the main players there have around 15% of the market. So still a lot of potential with Brazil and with this business model. But the idea is to expand the marketplace to be a truly one-stop shop with all the products within credit financing that you need would be in us, and that we always would have the best products. We have now Santander, Ícaro, and on the other scale, some small, fintechs within our partners to cover the whole spectrum, but there's always work to be done there. And so, yeah, no big new plans. It's more just to expand on what we have, and that gives you a lot of, it's more secure, right? That you can have your team at one place and focused on one market, and to fine tune that and optimize instead of always thinking about the next market or something. I hope after FinanZero to do something different, but that's probably a few years down the line.
Not there yet.
Not there yet.
And the same question for you, Ícaro. What does the future look like right now for you? Are you planning on staying in Sweden and working with Ericsson and maybe becoming an inventor of the year again? Or
That's not traditionally possible. I think they take it only once, and I think they should keep like that. Now I have a chance to influence because I'm working in the department that gives the award. So that will not happen. But I think I will continue in my current role for some time. I have no plans to move from Stockholm. There is some joke that they say, you asked if I was adapted. I feel I am adapted. And then there's always this question about the cold, right, in Stockholm. I was to say that, yeah, you get used to it, but it gets worse over time. It's not that it gets better. You feel like maybe going somewhere to a warmer place. I think I've been working more often with Brazil these past few years. I'm actually traveling once a year to some conferences and to meet some companies we will work with. So we never know, but there are no concrete plans at the moment for big changes in career. I think I found also maybe a place where I feel comfortable in my career and I want to spend some time on it. So maybe it's time to enjoy a bit rather than thinking about big changes, at least for a while.
sounds good. Okay, so now we will take some questions. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, most.
Okay, guys. So I will ask a question related to my specialization area, that is climate change, sustainability, so prepare yourselves. So considering the global emergency of climate change, sustainability, ESG, I would like to ask a question about Ícaro, Olle. How do you apply sustainability in your company? And Ícaro, how do you apply sustainability in your day job or in your daily life? So how do you guys see this emergency and how do you apply it?
It's quite interesting because now I need to think about some examples, but I'd like to start saying that this is such a, let's say, no discussion in the Swedish society. It feels like everybody is aware of that. Everybody is somehow trying to do something about. There are lots of tax incentives in the country to address that somehow. Like I was checking some statistics these days that Sweden and maybe Sweden, Denmark, I don't recall exactly, but I think Sweden is the country with most electrical cars in Europe, at least, if not in the world, percentage-wise, not volume-wise. But there's just a lot of talks about how to protect the environment. So usually the society is pretty conscious about it. And of course that reflects also in the Swedish companies, at least the ones which are the offices in Sweden, and how we do things, like from simple things like garbage collection to minimize commuting, for example. So I would say, yeah, we have Greta Thunberg, which you probably have heard about.
Yes.
So there's a lot of talks in society about that, and some political actions, and the companies just follow up on that. I think the recent from Ericsson was about the commuting and the traveling reductions, and that was one action we did. Yeah, but the whole society is deeply involved with that topic here in the Nordics, I would say. It really stands out compared to other places in the world, Sweden, on that topic.
Yeah, I think Brazil has a lot to learn from Sweden, and I don't know, is that your experience? You lived in Sweden as well?
I did, yeah.
How do you see it, if I can ask?
Yeah, it's a big difference.
You're a specialist.
Yes, it's a huge difference, because I feel that the sustainable way of living, it's already inside of the Swedes, and it's still
a mentality, right? It's very
exactly,
different.
and still we have a long way to go here in Brazil, because we are a huge country. We have many countries inside of one country, so it's really difficult.
Sure.
Yeah, but when I left Sweden, ESG there, it was like something like standard, especially for the company I worked with, IKEA, and it was like the normal thing to do. And then when I arrived here, people like, oh, ESG is the new thing in Brazil. And I say, guys, come on, speed up.
But it is also a global more trend. I guess Sweden and Scandinavia have been way ahead there, and so on. But we see a big part of my job, if I started just answering your question more in general, a lot is fundraising to grow the business, and now we see a lot of the funds investing in startups globally is definitely, this is one of the first questions. So your business model, is it good for society? You should much more, is it sustainable, and you have a manifest for your company. What we done in FinanZero is, we look at equality within the business, and we really try to be as inclusive as possible. I think the pandemic really changed things, also globally, of course, but it should make a real impact. There's some positive things there with, of course, not only home office, maybe we do a few days per week, a bit more optional, but also, of course, for long traveling or long travels. With now, you can have a lot of investor meetings. You don't need to meet in person with investors from the United States or from Europe. You can do it online, which I think over time should make a real impact. I haven't really seen all the statistics and so on. But from our point of view as well, we work with a credit marketplace, but I think marketplaces, especially online, it's good. It makes sense, right, to compare. And for us, we have most on the smartphone. 95% of our customers are all the visits, all the contracts we provide are through the smartphone. It is easy to compare. It's important to have a sustainable business model because interest rates in Brazil are high, and if you used to have a marketplace where you can go in and see, maybe you have a better offer somewhere else, but it hopefully helps with over time pressing down interest rates in Brazil, which is a good thing, which is kind of part of our mission. So what we heard, not from this Brazilian central bank, but from Sweden, is that you see not over 2-3 years, but over a few longer time, yes, it actually helps. They love this type of business models, right? That it's easy to connect and compare and educate, because what we see in Brazil, a lot of people just look, okay, what's the parcela mensal, what's the monthly payment? Don't think if it's 12 months or if it's 24 months, and just accept the lowest monthly payment. So this super basic things I say, hey, just look how we present the offer. You need to look at the total loan amount and how long you're gonna pay for it and so on. That I would categorize under ESG as well. The digitalization of the financial markets is has different sides to it, but overall I think it's positive to be able to do most of your business from home. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
More questions?
Yes, I have a question about the business opportunities. Let's say a Swede has a couple of $1 million over, wants to come to Brazil and do business. What would you suggest, Olle? Is it the fintech, or do you have any other business suggestions? What do you feel? And same way for you, Ícaro. Brazilians want to go to Sweden, do good business. Is it in telecom, or what do you feel could be an interesting area for a Brazilian startup in Sweden?
To invest in an existing business.
No, starting out from zero. In Brazil,
Startups. So basically, an entrepreneur with already having.
He wants an idea.
That's
He'll be back.
Ícaro, you want to start? Or?
Yeah, maybe you can start. I'm also curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I had a similar questions a few weeks ago. Kind of what type or what sector in the tech and the startup world will have a very bright future now in the near future, bright near future. I think you compare. We always look at Sweden compared with Brazil, and I believe all the electrification of transport, and that will be something to invest in. We know that there's a different structure, maybe a different kind of game plan in Brazil compared with Sweden, but it's coming here. And for transportation, maybe for electrical trucks and so on, and maybe it's a bit further down the line, but electrical vehicles or cars, they are coming slowly here, but we see how that exploded in other markets. So I think that is a lot of infrastructure around that. You don't need to start creating your own car, of course, but everything that is needed around that sector, I think that could be a good choice to start doing your market research and see how fast it's going to come, and all the city like São Paulo, all the charging stations and so on, and then over the whole country. But that's
would you say green tech in general, or mostly?
Yeah, green tech, I think it's more established here in other sectors. I think maybe you've seen that a lot. The solar energy, I think I used to work at Bloomberg. I remember back in 2011, 2012, I did a green energy seminar with Swede. So, but I think mainly more specifically on the electrification, I think there should be a lot of opportunities. I hope that is.
We all hope.
Let's see.
I don't have any good ideas now. If that would have been a few years back, I was going to mention one thing that started in Sweden, which was what's it called? It's called Swish. I don't know if any of you is familiar with it. It was, yeah, I know, but the Swish thing happened first here in Sweden, and I was thinking like, how many informal business would use that in Brazil? And then I think it was quite quick, the Pix came afterwards. And you know, nowadays, I travel to Brazil quite often, and I see it's really crazy how Pix is like popular, and especially for small business and so on. But with that comes to my mind comes also problems and issues and all kinds of schemes and scams as well. Right, so there's a lot of security issues related to security and safety issues that could be an interesting area to think about. How to make sure that all the generations can benefit from the stack revolution, where everything becomes digitalized, but at the same time, that can be used in a safe manner. Because of course, for younger generations, it's much easier to adapt and to see, but it's not just young people using Pix, right? It's everybody. Like, so that's just a thought that's an interesting thinking about how to make sure that all these platforms are sort of safe to be used and prone against crimes and things that we see happening, right? When always there's a new thing, there's always some bad thoughts behind someone trying to misuse the good thing. Yeah, it's just a thought.
Do you want final question?
Some more questions?
It's midnight almost for
Oh,
you.
Almost tomorrow here.
Any more question for Ícaro? Last one? No? Okay, for Olle? Okay, so we're done.
Everyone is shy today.
Yeah.
I'll be here for a beer.
Yeah, I'm
so-
questions later on, I'm sure.
After beer, there are more questions.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, thank you very much, Ícaro. It's really, it's an effort, 11 p.m. midnight working from Sweden. Thank you very much for staying
And
here
it's a
with us.
holiday today.
And it's a holiday, wow. Yeah.
It is.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Let's do a 6G event next year.
Oh yeah, 6G. We're waiting for 6G.
30, that's the plan.
Okay.
Shiny.
2030.
Thank you. I think we're just disconnect with him.
Yes, we're gonna disconnect with you now, but thank you so much, Ícaro, and we will see each other soon, hopefully.
Sure. Thank you for listening and for meeting you as well. Hopefully next time we can meet in person. Looking
Yes.
forward. And enjoy your beer.
Okay.
And applause to Vivi, the technician. Vivi.
Any questions online, Vivi?
No,
No.
no questions online.
Okay.
We can look
then
again,
I
but no.
say that we maybe say goodbye to our online audience and we go for a beer.
Sounds great.
Good,
Thank you
Miranda,
as well
good.
for joining us.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor, Miranda. Show the social media.
Oh, yes. Would you show
Yep.
me the rest? Okay.